On today's program, I interview Peter Kling. Using the science of biblical hermeneutics, Peter Kling has become known as the Einstein of biblical prophecy. And he's the author of Letters to Earth, The Future is Yours. To learn more about Peter Kling, visit peterkling.com. Please like the video, comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Enjoy the program. Peter Kling, welcome back to the program.
My pleasure.
Are you smoking?
Yes. I do smoke, but I roll my own cigarettes and I only use organic tobacco. And one cigarette will last me. Since I started doing this, I smoked about 25% of what I used to.
Yeah, I heard that the no filter is much better.
Yeah, and I go strictly organic, no pesticides, no chemicals added. You smoke anything that comes in a box out of North Carolina, and there's at least 100 different chemical compounds that they put into the tobacco to maintain the same flavor from year to year, batch to batch.
Right. You could grow your own tobacco.
I have seeds. I just haven't had the opportunity yet.
Yeah. Well, listen, you're moving to the country. Green Acres is the place for you. You're moving off grid.
Yes, I am.
So why don't you tell me the story and the audience about Peter Kling's move to the country and moving off the grid?
Well, I've known that, what is coming and what we're facing now has been, I've known this for, my whole life. And I enjoy being on the grid, I'll say that. I enjoy being able to flip a light switch. I enjoy being able to turn around and communicate on the computer, use the internet, things of that nature. You can do them to a degree off the grid, but you have to plan for it a whole lot more. I prefer not to live in cities. I prefer to be in a rural area. And so after most of my life, I've lived in a rural area. I enjoy the forest. I enjoy the wildlife and the nature around me, and that's more and more difficult to find every year. However, moving off the grid wasn't really brought on by my love of nature as much as it is brought on by my paying attention to biblical prophecy. We saw something very well. The anomalies have been going on. People just don't pay attention to it. They see an event and they say, oh, okay, that event's over. And then they see another event and that event's over. But they don't generally put together that these events are all played out for a reason. And this series of events started really with the Mandela funeral it was December 5th, 2013. And it's been a ritual that's been playing out ever since. And I believe it was 2013. But anyway, the whole world was focused on a man that may have been dead 3 times. There's a report that he died in prison. I saw the headline in June, the end of June, I believe it was 26th, that because I've been following it, his family petitioned the courts that they could pull the plug so he could pass. And nobody wanted to pull the plug. And finally, the court said, okay, yeah, okay, pull the plug. And then it was reported that he died. And then all of a sudden, it was reported, no, he's doing better, and he's going to go home to recover. It was like, wait a minute, they had him on a machine. Now they're taking him home to get better? That made absolutely no sense, but the world bought it. And then he officially died December 5th. It was after Comet Ison was erased from the night sky, basically. Oh, my goodness. And it was a 10-day ritual funeral. And not only CNN, the false news, did nothing but play 10 days of Mandela's funeral, but for the majority of it, so did China News. CNN News out of Beijing, China, was following this. And when China was doing it for as long as they did, I was like, yeah, okay, this ain't right. And then we find out a crazy man is standing next to Obama signing. How did that happen? But all of these things start to point to strange things that happen. Right after that, right at the end of the ritual, we had the Ebola outbreak in Africa, and then the revolution in Ukraine goes bloody. And what did we get after that? ISIS hits the airwaves. And from ISIS, which was this little group that springs up in the Middle East, now it's a plague across all of Islam. No doubt it's entered the United States and Europe too. It just hasn't become active cells yet. We've seen these individuals carrying out raids, as we saw in Orlando and out in California, and over in Paris, but we haven't seen full-blown, we haven't seen malls blow up. We haven't seen a lot of things that have happened in the Middle East and other countries where ISIS is active. We haven't seen those big things happen yet. Hold on, it might start. Again, more stuff for the future. But what really, really caught my attention, because this happened after we had the Mandela funeral, we had something very interesting that started on April 14th of 2014, and this caught my attention, and this I found out on October 10th, and I did a lot of work between the 2 days to really point to a lot of stuff. It was the first of the Tetrad blood moons, 4 full lunar eclipses, all on Hebrew holidays, over the course of 2014 and 2015. Also interspersed with those Tetrad blood moons were 4 eclipses, solar eclipses, and they fell on significant Jewish dates as well. At the end of the 4 Tetrad blood moons, what I saw fulfilled one of the main prophecies that Jesus gave in Matthew, the 24th chapter. Also, Daniel talked about it because Jesus references this here. But I want to ask a question of you first, Russell. What would you say are America's holy places? Now, America was the first government founded on separation of church and state. So, with that in mind, what would be America's sacred places or America's holy places?
Well, I'm a Canadian, so I know far less about Americana than you would. But I'm just assuming Washington, D.C., the White House?
Yeah, we would look at the White House. But the first place that we would actually look at it would be Independence Hall, because that's where it started. And then we look to our capital as the center of our government. And then we look to the White House as the leadership over the government. Those are really America's holy places. It's the lawmakers which established the separation of church and state. There's our capital. And it's the president that signed, that agreed to that and honors that agreement. And what did we see? These 3 symbolic American holy places, the places where American freedom and separation of church and state started and are upheld, were infiltrated by the highest level of religion on the face of the planet. They were invaded by the head of the Holy Pope of the Holy Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Catholic Church, the Holy See. Now, interestingly enough, when Jesus said these words around 33 CE, he was indicating it to Jerusalem. And the words to Jerusalem were fulfilled when, first in 67 CE, the Roman army came in and encircled Jerusalem and laid siege to the city, and then undermined the temple wall and came up inside and was standing in the most holy of the temple. And so this prophecy in Matthew, the 24th chapter, starting with the 15th verse, and I'm going to read this, it's 15 and 16. It says, "Therefore, when you catch sight of the disgusting thing that causes desolation, as spoken about by Daniel the prophet, standing in a holy place," then it says, "let the reader use discernment." Then in 16 says, "Then let those in Judea begin fleeing to the mountains." Now, for some reason, even after the Roman army came up inside the holy place, they didn't continue their siege to the city. They packed up and they left town. They didn't come back for 3 years. And it was during this 3-year period that those who were following the words of Jesus left. they understood, Rome left, we're out of here. Because we saw them standing where they ought not. The disgusting thing that causes desolation was standing in the most holy. 3 years later, General Titus comes back, and he comes back just at the time of Passover. And he catches Jerusalem full with all of the pilgrims that came around all throughout Judea and from different parts of the world that came to Jerusalem for Passover. And he laid siege to the city. He laid siege for 3 months. How long do you think it took for the food to disappear in the city of Jerusalem? Yeah, maybe. There was over 2 million people in the city of Jerusalem, according to the historian Josephus. Josephus said that when Rome finally did enter the city, that they put to death over 2 million Jews, and they took 93,000 captive back to Rome. Now, for those who followed the words of Jesus, they were not affected because they got out 3 years earlier. Think about that. Now, I see. Now, here's an interesting correlation. Because of what the stand that my family took, and I only found this out literally just not quite a year ago, but because of the stand that my family took during the Reformation, or right at the beginning of the Reformation against the church, and they were exposing the church for the lies that they were perpetrating upon the people, we stood with Martin Luther and condemned the church. For that, we were excommunicated, and the church hunted us down and murdered my family wherever they could find us for just about 300 years. It was finally put to an end by the Napoleonic Wars. So they literally decimated my family, or they desolated my family back then. So I kind of take this kind of personal. So it's kind of interesting finding this out at this time when I see this disgusting thing which causes desolation standing in America's holy places. I see the Pope standing at the Capitol. I see him standing at the White House. I see him standing in Independence Hall. I see him standing in the places that America separated church and state. Why is he standing in America's holy places? Oh, well, he's the Pope. Yeah. Obviously, Rome had control of America's holy places. And we know that through the Knights Templar and the letter of endorsement that Obama had from, not Knights Templar, Knights of Malta, and the letter of endorsement that Obama had from the Knights of Malta. So yes, the Pope did have control of the White House, and still does have control of a good part of Congress. The United States of America is the United States of America, Inc., Incorporated. And it was actually Rome that invented incorporation, and it was the Holy Roman Church that perfected corporation. Hence, all corporations lead to Rome. That's why every religion on the planet that is incorporated is controlled by the Catholic Church. Interesting, huh? If they're incorporated, they're controlled. And so here I'm seeing these things, and what do I think? Well, time to flee to the mountains. Now, the Vatican isn't literally standing in the holy place of Jerusalem yet, but that agreement has been signed, giving control to, actually, they're just working out the last details, but at the end of last year, something that was slipped past the people of Israel was the government of Israel giving control of the old city of Jerusalem to the Holy See. And that's why there's a big issue going on with what the UN is doing with Israel in a two-party state, because under that agreement, the old city goes to Islam. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And that was done after the fact. So interesting. We'll have to see which agreement stands on what. And so I see these things, and knowing prophecy the way that I do, what would you expect me to do? Leave the city. Get off the grid. I mean, get off the grid. Yeah. Seriously, get off the grid. go find a place that is a safe haven. Now, there's lots of reasons for this, not just because the Pope was standing in America's holy places, but, and I might add something, we have been looking for just the right place, so to speak, to relocate to. It's not like we just put our finger on the map. A lot of work has gone into this. And it's taken, I would have been off the grid before that, but we just didn't find the right place until the end of November of 2015. We found a place that we could afford, and it was just totally, we actually found it on Craigslist of all places. Couldn't find anything dealing with real estate companies, but we actually found this on Craigslist. And it all just fell right into place. We actually, from the time that we made first contact with the owners, and we did to go through the real estate company, but from the time that we made first contact until the time that the deal was closed, signed, sealed, and delivered was 6 weeks. Quick negotiation. That's over the Christmas holiday. It started in December and it ended the middle of January. We were done. And we had a location to go to. A location which is in an area where community is still important, where people know each other, where people know who not just lives next door, but lives on the other side of the county. This is some place that you can go, and if you're in the grocery store or supermarket and you forget something in your car, let's say you run out of money or whatever and you don't have enough to pay for it, you can slap your wallet right down in front of the cashier, say, I'll be right back, go out to your car, get what you need, and come back in and pay them, and nobody will touch anything. They're still honest. Imagine that. Honesty among people. I'm not saying everybody, but the general population. You lay your wallet down on a counter somewhere, and you can, in any kind of urban or area, and for sure you can come back and expect not to find it, and nobody would tell you who took it. There's a video that somebody posted on my Facebook feed. This guy is having a seizure in the middle of a mall, and some other guy comes up to him and steals his wallet while he's having a seizure. Instead of coming to his aid, trying to help, he steals his wallet and walks away. Can you imagine that? And everybody's just watching this guy have his seizure on the ground. Nobody wants to come to his aid. And that's the kind of world that this world has become. But there are other reasons. Just because the Pope was there, we know that we have something going on with this planet in a lot of different ways. We see chemtrails spraying. We see the Schumann resonance of the planet vibrating. The Earth is got a wobble to it. There's an interesting NASA satellite video on that. You can actually see Earth's wobble. But if you don't find that video, you can look up at the moon. Watch the moon as it goes through its phases. As it waxes and wanes, the shadow of the moon is on different areas of the moon. Sometimes it's up at the top. Sometimes it's down toward the bottom. It's never waxing the same way from like 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, or from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock like it used to. Now it waxes and wanes all over the place. Why is that? Why do the Inuit Indians say they're not seeing the stars rise in the same places they used to? The Schumann resonance is really the interesting one, because it's driven the vibration of Earth from theta, which is where we actually are sleeping most of the time when we're in theta or deep meditation. Theta is the vibration between 4 and 8 hertz per second, and the Earth used to vibrate at 7.83 hertz. Now it's vibrating. It's slowly increased, but all of a sudden it just jumped up to 13 to 35 hertz. What's driving the Schumann resonance of the Earth up? There's no real answers for that. Nobody's coming forth and saying, well, it's going up because of this. And you can't blame it on CERN all the time. We might be able to blame some spikes on CERN, but why isn't the Schumann resonance of Earth dropping back down to 7.83 hertz? It's staying elevated. That's why people's sleep patterns are being erratic all around the planet. Everybody's sleep patterns that I've talked to, I say, oh yeah, I can't sleep at night, or I wake up often, or I want to sleep during the day, whatever. Everybody's being affected by this, because the Earth is vibrating at a state of beta, and for us humans, the state of beta is where the fight and flight response is. If our brain is vibrating at 35 hertz per second, we are basically fighting for our lives. Think about that. So we have too many anomalies to say that, oh, well, it's business as usual. Something is going on. Something deep is going on. And if we're not recognizing that, then maybe we need to start looking, because the evidence is all around us. And there's even more pictures of two suns that I can't dispute, or what seems to be a sun and something smaller. And then we have, and we've discussed this on previous shows, we've got the biblical prophecy of a Nibiru type event. There's Stitchin's work, whether you want to believe he was right or wrong, it still exists. Some sort of crossing tied with aliens, speaking of which we have more alien reports and more reports of UFOs than ever before. Why? Too many anomalies. So the only answer that I have is that more biblical prophecies are about to be fulfilled, which I totally expect. And we're not just moving to a place, it's not built. We have to build our place off the grid. We're back on the grid right now because had we not made that move, we would have been covered with they have total snowfall for where we are. The total snowfall for this year is just about 10 feet. And so being off the grid, trying to live in a travel trailer, a glorified camper basically, and deal with at least what's probably in the woods now of about 6 feet of snow up on the side of a mountain without having anything more than the snow for insulation would have been a deadly option, considering the temperatures that it's gotten there. So obviously we're back on the grid, and I'm happy to be here because I'm happy to share this time with all of you. It's kind of like getting the last message out. Will I be back on the grid anytime soon? Well, I'll be here. I got to wait for the snow to melt, or we have to wait for the snow to melt before we can get back up there. So I'm figuring I'm going to be here until probably around the middle of April anyway, maybe the end of April, before we can get back and carry on our work. And for that, I have mixed emotions. But let me tell you, I have never felt so free as I did when we first moved off the grid, and while we were living off the grid. It's like, you finally get your house in order, or the camp in order, and now everything seems to be settled out, and you have a few minutes to think about things, and it's like, wow, the silence is beautiful. You look up at the stars at night, and it's almost like they're apples hanging from a tree, and you can pick them. That's how close they seem. You see micro shooting stars up there that you don't see down here. And you see all of these tiny little streaks that just they go past, and you can actually see them. The skies are so clear. Extremely little chemtrailing. Did see chemtrailing while we were there, but like I said, not very much. But you just take everything in. And you know what? Here's the greatest thing. There's no stop signs, no street lights, no shouting, no cars driving by all day long, no people yelling, no people screaming, no rioters. You're not being bombarded by the daily false fake news, as Trump calls it. It's like, yeah, you're isolated, but wow, what a place to be isolated in. No Wi-Fi, no radio frequencies disturbing our DNA. The closest we were to the nearest cell tower was just about the extent that it can reach, about 30 miles. So we weren't really being affected by any cell tower radiation. Here, I'm living about a half a mile from the closest cell tower, and that thing's got more rays on it than a porcupine's got quills. So what's coming off of that thing? Plus all the Wi-Fi that we have around here, plus the smart meters, plus everything else. We're living in this microwave oven almost, which has got to be upsetting our physiology. And if that's not upsetting your physiology, here's something that is. The very computer you're sitting in front of, the very TV that you sit in front of, the very smartphone that you're using, all control your physiology. There was a patent issued in 2002 for a patent to use monitors to control people's physiology. So yes, they can control the way that we feel and to an extent the way that we think just by looking at the computer screen. Interesting, isn't it? And you don't have any of that off the grid. It does take planning. It's not, well, it takes planning unless you can find the right place. So I found one place that I thought was just perfect. It was a turnkey operation. Some folks had lived there they spent their retirement there. It was a couple of folks. Unfortunately, the woman passed away. She was in her 80s. Her obituary picture was a picture of her with her snowmobile outfit on and her helmet on her snowmobile. Think about that. Here's an old woman riding a snowmobile, and her thing was she cut all trails through. It was 40 acres at this piece of property. She cut all trails through so she could ride on them with her snowmobile, and she named all the trails after her children and grandchildren. So that was a turnkey operation, but we just couldn't make the deal there to pull that deal off. So we started to do everything by scratch and do things the way that we wanted to do it. So you can find places that are a turnkey operation. By that, what I mean is that they do have electric there that they self-generate. There's some kind of solar panel, but you need really at least 3 means of making your own electricity if you're going to live off the grid successfully and not have to break your back. Modern conveniences are nice, and you can get, once you made your initial investment, you have free energy, which nobody can take away from you. But you need a good solar array, and you need at least a good windmill. So typically, if you're running into a storm, you're not getting the solar output, but you do have the wind. Not too often is it both, overcast and not windy, but those days do happen too. And sometimes you can create enough electric with both of them going at the same time. But you do need a backup system, and even a third method might be good, hydroelectric, if you're near water. That's something that is now in the state of Maine where we relocated to. They are now learning, how to deal with people who want to use their own hydroelectric. Because the state doesn't want you putting in your own dam and having the dam break and you flooding out 100 people downstream. So all that's closely regulated. But there are a lot of methods to make your life easy. And you can always find a camp that's off the grid and put in your own solar arrays or have somebody put them in there. And it's a life change. And here's the thing. If you're thinking, oh my, this is so terrible, I need to run away from this, you are going to fail. I promise you, you are going to fail. Never run away from something unless you absolutely have to. Always, always run to something. You see, when we're running away from something, occasionally we're looking back to see if it's catching up with us or what our status is. This is a time when we don't want to look back. We want to look ahead. And so focus on our future. If you're going to bust a move, get off the seacoast, first of all. Get out of major cities along the seacoast. Or if you can't, at least have an escape route, several escape routes in case one is blocked. If we do have this Nibiru situation, we could very easily have the electric grid go down in no time. We could have tsunamis along the coastlines that'll just destroy the coastlines. The biblical prophecy starts off with a major earthquake. So, when we see a major earthquake, expect the rest of the stuff to start to fall into place. The sun will be turned to darkness, the moon will become as blood. The stars will fall from the heavens like a fig shaking off its unripe figs in a windstorm. That's, if you have a nut tree, an acorn tree, you might experience the same thing in the fall. You get one of those hurricanes that'll come through in the northeast here, or some storm, and you'll see all of a sudden a lot of immature acorns laying all over the ground the next day. So that type of thing. We'll see shooting stars from all the debris from probably a brown dwarf star passing us. brown dwarf stars are iron stars, and they leave iron oxide or rust in their wake. So that coming through the atmosphere will provide a brilliant light show, if nothing else. But it's going to affect us directly. It says that the island groups and mountains would be removed. And this is when John sees the elite of the world calling out to the mountains and the rock masses to cover them over, to hide them from the wrath of the Lamb, the one sitting upon the throne. So this is connected with the judgment of this system of evil. So if you're living in one of the centers of this system of evil, and there is a big push on for people to move into cities, to leave the outskirts and get into the cities and sanctuary cities. Come on, come by us, live by us. But it's actually more than that. The more people you can put into a more densely populated area, the easier it is to control. The problem is, if the grid goes down, let's take the New York metropolitan area. There's about 20 million people in the New York metropolitan area. How quick is the food going to go if there's only 3 days worth of food in the food chain? About 3 days. What are they going to do for food after that? Wait for FEMA to show up? With government cheese? There'll be mass chaos. People looking for food, just as it was in Jerusalem. Just as the people went through the food in an instant because they were caught there. That food in the marketplace dried up within the first couple of days. Josephus said it got so bad that women were actually eating their own children. Now, I'm not saying that they killed their children and ate them, but the child probably died from malnutrition and they ate the body. So we don't want to ever have to be put into that position, ever. You know, that's a pretty scary thing. But we can create a new future for ourselves. We can create a better future. If we can become as independent as we can and learn techniques of farming, learn techniques of agriculture, learn how to plant trees, how to plant crops, learn how to live off of the land, learn how to live in harmony with nature. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? You know, that's why I say we need to run to something. It's interesting. We had a pretty rainy few days, and I decided that I was going to go down the road and in toward town. There was a laundromat there, and do some laundry. And make a long story short, I met a gentleman who just moved up to the area from Kentucky. He was there with his son, and he said, "Yeah, I wanted to raise my son in a place where life is the way that it should be." He said, and so for the same reasons that we could, without getting into any conspiracy theories, without getting into any biblical prophecy, without getting into talking about Planet X, just the social aspect of it was we wanted to be in a place where life was conducive, where life was in harmony. And those are difficult places to find. So my recommendation is, yeah, change your lifestyle. It's not going to be easy, but I'll tell you what, you'll feel better. I can't believe the health change or the health benefit that I had when we moved off the grid. I noticed my own stamina increasing, that little bulge I had around the middle, even though I'm on the thin side anyway, that vanished. When we got back, we were off grid for about 4.5 months. When we got back, or actually just 4 months, August, September, October, and November, we came back on grid. It was the first time I actually looked at myself in a mirror. Took a shower, came out of the shower, and looked in a full-length mirror, and I looked at my body, and I said, "Wow, I haven't seen that since I was 17." So, I definitely was physically stronger, and I felt much better. I felt healthier, just being off the grid for those 4 months. So, here's another thing. I've never been able to eat store-bought eggs, not since I was in my mid-teens. I just can't eat them. Not that I don't like them. They don't like me. We started raising our own chickens and eat our own chicken eggs. They're great. I can eat as many as they can lay. No problems. So, once you start doing things for yourself, you're making sure that, you're putting in the right fertilizer. You're not laying down Roundup and other weed killers, or you're not throwing the chemical fertilizer all over the place. You're living in harmony with nature. So you're using organics, and you're producing something that you're proud of, that you're going to consume, and you're happy to do it. But it does take a life change. It's something you have to head to. It's something you have to want to do. Because if not, it can be a really hard sentence. And I say sentence because it can be like solitary confinement. It's not like without having modern conveniences, without having communication, or the communications that we have now, living more in harmony with nature, you're communicating more with the world in your present area of control, as opposed to those outside. And so we get the benefit of not being bombarded by all the garbage that we are now. But you're happy when a neighbor stops by. You drop what you're doing, you go over, you say hello, whether you know them or not. You see people going by, and you always say hello. You want to know who's coming up the mountain, want to know why they're going by, and they're happy to talk to you. Everybody will chat with everybody else. And so but you're happy to do that. It's not like you ignore the neighbor when he's in, the guy that's living next door, the family that's living next door. Is that they may be out in their yard all the time. You may not say two sentences to them, and they may not say two sentences to you. That's just the way we are today. But up there, it's a totally different life. People care about other people. They communicate. They're more than happy to stop and talk. Yeah. Life slows down, and we're not as harried by the day-to-day things of driving to work. Matter of fact, my son used to joke, because we would take equipment, we'd load it in the truck and then drive it down the road that we built to get to the house site, the job site where we were working. So the generator and things like that went down there. And he would joke about the commute. We would both joke about the commute. What a terrible commute. It was about 600 feet long, where now just to get to his office, he has to drive just about 60 miles. And then he's got to drive another 60 after that to get to where they're working. So we went from 600 feet to 120 miles. That's one way. So when how much stress is that to drive with, have that much windshield time in your life? There's so many different advantages to being off the grid, but you have to want the lifestyle change. It's not for everybody. What I will recommend, if it's not for you, make sure you're prepared. Make sure you're prepared to live without electric, and make sure you're prepared to have enough food to last more than 3 days. There were reports coming out of Europe that different countries were telling their citizens to have at least 30 days of food on hand. Of course, they're trying to stir up a war with Russia over there, but that's what they were telling their people. Make sure you have at least 30 days of food on hand. Once upon a time, the majority of the people of this country grew their own food, and they had over a year's worth of food on hand. Now, if you do that, you might be a terrorist. I don't know what else to say. Start a farm. Grow your own food. You're going to have food on hand if you're producing your own food. You'll want a year's worth of food on hand because you only have one growing season, and that growing season has to last you the year. And so, while we're not under the stress of a system that's falling apart, while we still have electricity that we can use, if you do have any intentions, if we have any idea at all about relocating to a safer place, this might be the time to do it. Trump might be buying us a window here, so to speak. Everything, if you listen carefully to his campaign, everything that the media lambasted him on were things that we know and he talked about. And the media basically went after him with the hammers of hell in order to say, oh, no, he's wrong. It's all a lie. He's misinformed. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But yeah, we're talking about the same things, even 9/11. You don't think Donald Trump knows who's behind the events of taking down the World Trade Center? You don't think he knows what we know? Come on. This is a guy that knows what we know. And he knows who's behind the things that we know. Because he probably knows a lot more than what we know, especially now that he's president. So hate him all you want. I don't care. I'm not a Trump supporter. I didn't vote for him. I'm not part of the political system. My kingdom is no part of this world. Although I am living here in the United States at the time. So it's all how we approach our future. If we approach it in fear, we're going to live in fear. If we approach it with a positive outlook, we can then take control of the situation. And once we take control of the situation, we don't have to be afraid. Think about that. When you are in control, you don't have to be afraid, because now it's you that are making the decisions. And it's always to come from the cause of, well, let's leave that one go. It just slipped my mind. But it's always better to turn around and look forward to something, as I said, or run to something, to be able to create something new, than to live in the disaster or put up with what you're putting up with now, or having to run away from a bad situation. So now's the time. We got plenty of time. I'm looking forward to a full season. Hopefully we can get our project complete before the snow falls next year, or actually the end of this year. And considering that we have 6 months to work on it instead of just the 4, I'm sure we'll be in pretty decent shape considering how far along we are already. As I mentioned, there was such a spiritual healing that we have felt up there that we actually thought of, and we intend to do this if time does permit. It won't be ready this year, but it will be ready next year. We're going to put up a couple of small camps where just like I say, camp is essentially a cabin, where folks can come up and actually stay for a week or so and experience this life off the grid and feel the freedom and the spiritual healing that actually takes place. It's noticeable right away. It really is. Life is simple. It's as simple as we choose to make it. It's not easy. I'll tell you what, we did a lot of physical work. I haven't done that much physical work since I was 17. But I was able to do it. It was great. I'm 60 years old. I was doing the same work I did back then. Fantastic. Anyway.
Oh, your cell phone's going there, Peter.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
He's a hip 60-year-old.
Yeah, I was like the last of the hippies out of the 60s, so. And it's unfortunately the phone's too far away to reach, and the microphone and the headphone set is too short, so I'll have to call that person back. I have a feeling I already know who it is. I've got another radio show to do later on this evening, so, and it's somebody who I'll be doing the radio show with, not for. So it's there's 2 guests, myself and Dr. Jason Rand. Dr. Rand is a very interesting person too. He's quite he wrote the book Return of Planet X, so he's pretty informed on the subject. But we have a lot of people that understand that something is definitely going on. A lot of people there's a lot of Planet X books out there. Like I said, if you want to do something, now's the time to do it. And with that, I think that we're pretty much summed up on that. Do your investigation, do your homework, and head off the grid.
Yeah, and your book, Letters to Earth, there's nothing about prepping in there, I don't believe.
Here's the thing. I'm not going to do a book on prepping, because that's not where my expertise is. I don't have 35 years knowledge in prepping. My knowledge comes in biblical prophecy and how it's applied to today, and how the science is behind that. The book is Letters to Earth. The future is yours. We can create our future. That I do talk about in that book. And it is something that we can do and should be doing. You can find it on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. Ask your local bookstore. It's published by Neely Publishing. You can also, if you make a donation on my website to help keep the work going, peterkling.com, I will send you a PDF copy of Letters to Earth. More than happy to do that. And every little bit helps us carry out this project. We are extremely underfunded and extremely ambitious.
Who isn't?
Yeah, the one positive thing that I think may make this turn the corner is there may be some possibility of getting on coast to coast. I went down that avenue once by myself and was totally ignored, even though they loved the information. But now my publisher is working on it, so we'll see what happens on that. George Norey was on another show, Late Night in the Midlands, that I'm on a lot. And seeing as that ice was broken, there might be further hope. So that will certainly increase book sales and get the information out to a lot of people who will appreciate it and need it. But whether I make it to coast or not, that'll be another question. But there is some fantastic information. It's the best explanation of where we came from, why we are here, why things are as messed up as they are, and what our future is going to be. And we have a fantastic future. Everybody stops when they get to the Armageddon. They never go those other couple of chapters beyond that are so fantastic. And so that's where we want to focus. We know that this system has to go down. We know that we can no longer do business as usual. Exactly how much difference Trump is going to make, I don't know. But he can't stop Planet X or Nibiru. He can't stop an EMP knocking out the grid. And the first thing we need to do to be prepared is to be prepared mentally and spiritually. If you're not prepared mentally and spiritually, no matter what you do physically, it won't matter at all. It will not matter at all. So before we can get it right on paper or we can get it right on the ground, we have to get it right between our ears and within our hearts. Because the heart, they say, is the seat of motivation. So if you have a heartfelt desire for something, you're going to be motivated to do something, to carry that out. And if you know that there's a situation facing you and you are heartfelt to get through the situation, guess what? You're going to be able to get through that situation no matter what it is, even if it is the paradigm change of this system collapsing and coming to an end, the end of the satanic system of evil, and the establishment of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, establishing of that kingdom. Think less religious and more extraterrestrial. That's probably the best way to put it. So we got more alarms going off.
Oh my goodness. Speaking of extraterrestrials, some signal from the mothership.
Yeah, kind of. You wonder about that sometimes. You look at what's actually talked about within prophecy, and yeah, the armies go from one end of the universe. Well, it says from one end of the heavens to the other they are gathered. So we can talk about the cosmos in place of the heavens. The cosmos envelops everything. I guess you can include all 10 dimensions in that. So with that, I guess we'll say until next time, love and blessings to all. Read Letters to Earth. The future is yours.